So I wanted to start by saying, yesterday, Seppi, I don't know where Seppi is. You here? Well, someone named Seppi who works for CPPR interviewed me, and he asked me a question. He said, how do you feel as an Indian American about India's climate stance? And you know, I had to stop and think for a second because, frankly, I had approached this question as an American. As an American, I thought, look, my country's doing great things. But only when I got here did I understand the context. Listening to folks here, did I understand the context of, in India, there are real development challenges to be faced. And that this country has completed a market shift in its willingness to engage in the international climate process. And I really appreciate that now, and I wanted to say thank you to Dhanuraj and CPPR for inviting me here. Because now I genuinely do feel like, as an Indian American, I understand the stance of both India and my own country, the United States. And I'm sorry to the cameraman, I'm going to keep walking around. Today, I wanted to talk to you guys about my thoughts on technology. And so, I've called this Innovative Technologies for Modern Power Sector, but I could have called it What is Wrong with Innovation Today? Because I think there are serious, deep-seated problems. I don't know how this works. Talking about the perils of technology lock-in. You guys have heard lock-in a lot at this conference. Previously, you've heard about lock-in in a negative connotation, that you may not want to lock in inefficient fossil fuel generating power. You've also heard lock-in in a positive connotation, that you want to lock in new and efficient technologies right now as India builds up its infrastructure. I'm going to tell you about a third kind of lock-in, one that's not talked about very often, and that's what I call technology lock-in. When the first generation of technology can lock in and prevent the second generation of technology from taking over. So I come from the field of solar panels. And in solar panels today, we use a technology called silicon that's probably about 60 years old. It was invented in 1954 in Bell Labs, and we still use the same solar panel today. It still operates largely the same way. And that first generation clean technology, in my opinion, has successfully locked out a second generation of technology that could be superior. How does that happen? Well, on the top right, you see a graph of how the cost per unit of a first generation technology, that brown line, can decline over time. And that's just a consequence of learning. The more of the stuff you produce, the cheaper it becomes. The problem is then when a new technology comes around, that blue curve over the long run, which government policy has naively supported. That's bad because what we really need in solar power and in other technologies are vastly innovative versions of what we have today. The favorite quote that I have is by a guy from Caltech who says, if you want solar panels, you want something that's going to be cheap enough to roll out as a carpet or paint your wall with. Think potato chip, not silicon chip. I won't explain this, but I can talk about it in questions if you guys are interested. So I'm worried about lock-in. Can we go to the next one? I'm worried about lock-in in more than just solar. I think in these three technologies in particular, we've seen lock-in happen, and it's happening today. In the nuclear sector, the Americans, my people, came around and commercialized the nuclear light water reactor for nuclear submarines in the 1950s. And ever since we did that, we've been locked into the light water reactor, which is only one of like 15 to 20 different technologies, many of which are safer, more efficient, and have better fuel cycles. In solar, I already told you, silicon solar panels today control 90% of the market. We're locked into silicon. Whereas new materials, I'll talk about one that I worked on later on, promise better cost, better performance, and more versatility. You can do more stuff with them. In batteries, we're seeing lock-in happen today. In batteries, we see the lithium-ion battery, which came out of consumer electronics. This may be powered by lithium-ion battery. Your cell phone is. Get scaled up to electric vehicles. But really, lithium-ion is not the optimal technology, and many people know this. Lithium-ion is definitely not the best technology for electricity grid storage. Instead, we're going to need new chemistries. But because companies like Tesla, which Dhanuraj alluded to, and BYD in China are scaling up lithium ion, we may never get past this first generation. Thanks. My clicker works. So what's wrong? Well, one of the things that's wrong is that the venture capital model for my country that works so well for software, works so well when you had 3 guys and a dog go and create Facebook, does not work well for clean technology. Here's some descriptive stats. From 2006 to 2008, we had a boom and bust cycle in clean technology venture capital. A lot of money poured into companies, one of which I worked for, NanoSolar. NanoSolar made this cool printable solar panel from an inkjet printer. We thought we were going to take over the world. 5 years later, the company was bankrupt, along with 150 other Silicon Valleys that all went bankrupt. And that's what you see here. The funding dried up when the venture capitalists... By the way, can everyone raise your hand if you know what a venture capitalist is? Okay, so about half the room raised their hands. A venture capitalist is somebody who invests in an early stage company to help them commercialize their technology. So VC funding dried up. And I believe that VC was just the wrong model for clean technology. Why? Well, if you look at the risk-return profile, it turns out that clean technology companies are a really bad fit for venture capitalists compared to software companies and medical technology companies. You see, the blue dots are software companies. They have a high risk, but also a high return. That makes sense. You're willing to take on a high risk if you get a lot of money back. If every Snapchat sells for several $1 billion, which is unbelievable, by the way. Then you look at medical technology companies. A little worse, but still high risk, high-ish return. What about clean technology companies? These are your solar, battery, ocean wave, wind technology companies. They're all the way down here. Really high risk, super low return. No investor wants to invest in these companies anymore. Now, what's one reason that clean tech companies did so badly compared to the other two? Well, it makes sense that software is a lot easier to commercialize. You just need a bunch of guys with computers. But medical technology, that requires real capital intensity, a lot of production machinery. How come clean tech did worse than medical technology? Well, the reason, in my opinion, is in medical technology companies, oh, this is the wrong slide. I'll explain this point. In medical technology companies, large pharmaceutical companies were willing to buy the med tech companies. That resulted in larger returns for medical technology companies than for clean tech companies that were never bought by other large industry. And so what I think is, rather than just throw VC money at clean technology, what we really need is to get large industry involved. Large companies like Intel plunge 20% of their sales revenue into research and development, fueling a virtuous cycle of innovation. Again, companies like Merck in the pharmaceutical industry do the same thing. But companies like Trina Solar, one of the largest solar panel manufacturer, puts less than 1% of its sales revenue into research and development. The point is, innovation is not happening in clean technology because venture capitalists are the wrong funders, the government is not doing enough, and we don't have big business invested in clean technology like we should. Why do you guys care? I've so far been telling you a story about the developed world, about the United States, and why innovation has failed in the United States. Well, the reason I think you should care is because over the next few decades, I anticipate a convergence in what's going to be needed in the developed world and in the developing world in the power sector. That convergence, which came to me on the 15-hour Air India flight from California, that insight is that in the developed world, we're going to move from a system that is super centralized, where you have a central power station, this could be a gas plant, a nuclear plant, a coal plant, generate power and send it in one direction to all 3 customers. That's the old model. To a new model in the future where, sure, you have this central power plant, but you also have solar panels on houses and electric vehicles, and you have a lot of data and information communication protocols going on. And it's a much more decentralized hybrid system. I think that's where we're moving in the developed world. And in the developing world, I think we're going to converge from the opposite direction. That opposite direction is that the starting point today in countries like India is that there isn't a very reliable, robust central grid. You all know that. But there is opportunity, as many folks say, to leapfrog. And by leapfrogging, we mean to start using new technologies, for example, decentralized solar, to create these decentralized systems. First, just for a house, then you have a lot of houses, and then you start to have this self-assembly organically from the bottom up, where your bunch of standalone solar systems get connected, interconnected households turn into a hybrid system of interconnected households connected to the grid. This system is converging to this system. That's what I see in the coming decades. And I think that decentralized, distributed, hybrid architectures for the developing world are really going to improve the affordability, reliability, and energy access afforded to the developing world in countries like India. Solar power could be the crux of this. And in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to release a report along with Stanford University arguing that, in fact, solar power provides a tremendous opportunity for India, but only if India focuses as much on the decentralized solar power as on the centralized solar power. This is the Modi administration's goal. The slides just changed because now we're doing Stanford slides. The Modi administration says that utility-scale solar, which are these huge solar farms or parks, are going to account for 60 gigawatts by 2022. And then the brown region, the distributed solar, which is rooftop and other decentralized installations, are going to account for a further 40 gigawatts. This little blue slice is for off-grid, which is deceptive because this is actually millions, tens of millions of households. However, we are on pace to meet the utility scale target. India has done a tremendous amount. Right now we're right around here, and based on current trends, Bridge to India forecasts that India's utility scale solar is going to grow fast. It's going to track the target. That's great. But what about rooftop and distributed solar? Bridge to India forecasts that rooftop and distributed solar, based on existing trends, is going to lag the target by a whole lot. We'll barely get to 5 gigawatts by 2022. So based on that, I really think that new technologies are going to be crucial to enable the decentralized hybrid power system in India. What's one of those technologies? I want to tell you a little bit about the work I did at Oxford University, and now that has spread to universities and research labs around the world. Professor can back me up here. Perovskite solar, coolest technology in solar? He's nodding. This is an article I wrote with my professor Henry Snaith, who's in Oxford. This material is amazing. I mean, when we figured this thing out, it was a mind-blowing discovery. Because this material, unlike silicon, which has been dominating solar for the last 60 years, this material can be any color you want it. Here we made it orange. Any color you want. It can be cheap, it can be a coating, it can be flexible, it can be lightweight. Imagine an Indian house, some Indian house either in an underserved part of a city or in a village. It probably doesn't have the roof strength to hold up conventional solar panels, which are heavy, rigid, and frankly pretty ugly. However, this technology that can be literally any color you want and can just coat a rooftop or a window, that really can be a solution here. And the amazing thing is it's as efficient or even more efficient than existing technologies, existing silicon technologies. But I just told you guys about all these obstacles that face innovative technologies. They can't get funding, big companies don't want to invest in them, what are they going to do? Our idea is to have the perovskite solar technology piggyback on the existing silicon technology. This is a schematic of a silicon solar cell, and we just put a perovskite coating on top. That increases the efficiency of your existing panels. It's kind of like our Trojan horse. Is everyone familiar with the Trojan horse? Yeah? The Trojan horse approach is, hey, we'll partner with the large silicon companies. We'll add a coating. But once we figured out how to build our perovskites at scale, I believe perovskites can really take over the entire solar market. And that's just one example of an innovative technology that we need to deploy to enable affordable and clean energy in the developing world. For more, check out our blog. I write with Michael Levy on CFR's Council on Foreign Relations Energy Security and Climate blog. Shoot me an email. I'm going to be here in India for a couple weeks. Would love to talk to all of you. Thanks so much.